My name is Andre. I work at Google. I'm on the Chrome and Web Partnerships team, and I'm the one who has the privilege and the joy of working with a lot of our CMS partners across the world. So we just, not that long ago, we had a brief conversation with the folks from the Drupal Association, some of whom you might have just been watching on the main session, and said, why don't you guys do something fun at DrupalCon Europe? And we're like, what are we going to do? We talked about performance through and through for the past couple of years. We're not going to be able to say anything entirely new. How about we do something a little bit more fun? How about we do something a little bit interactive and hands-on? And that's where Michael and amazeeio stepped up. And this is how this idea was born, to actually do a workshop with you all. I hope this is going to work. There's going to be a very small live demo from me. And then the main part of the workshop is a lot of live coming from Michael. So as always, please bear with us, and fingers crossed everything works out. But most importantly, I hope you take away some of the fundamentals and also some of the tips. Never hesitate to ask questions in the chat, in the polls, in the Q&A, whatever it is that you whatever it is that you like using on Hopin. I'll try to keep track of all of that. If I miss something, please don't be mad. Just ask again. All right. Let me see if everything wants to behave like we want it to behave. I'll start by, honestly, not many slides today, I promise, swear to God. Just a few to give me a bit of a backbone to the narrative and make sure that we're all on the same page. I have a guess that a lot of you are quite familiar with the issues of performance and the concept of core web vitals. João, you don't need to prepare anything. Michael will share everything you need to do with you in a second. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but it's nothing complicated. You can do everything on the fly. So as I was saying, probably a lot of you are quite familiar with this stuff. I just want to make sure that all of us are on the same page, and plus give you a chance to ask maybe some more in-depth questions as we go along about things that may have remained unclear to you. Let's check this out. So hopefully we know where we are, and we know what this is. This is us. This is Andre and Michael, and here it is again. As I said, I'm on the CMS partnership team here, based in Zurich. Do feel free to reach out during this. Afterwards, I'm very, very happy to engage with you all and keep the conversation going after the fact. I know Michael seems to have dropped off trying to fix his mic. I don't want to introduce him for him. I'll briefly introduce him, and he can say a couple of words about himself when he rejoins. So Michael is from amazeeio. He's the head of technology, one of the founders. So it's an enormous privilege to have him here with us. And also, you can see his Twitter handle is much cooler than mine, because he's cool like that. So Twitter Schnitzel. Before we dive right in, I want to set the grounds with a quick story. Right, all the names of people and websites in this story, and even platforms, have been altered to preserve anonymity and not to put anybody on the spot. But the story is real enough. So I don't know if any of you have heard of Nana. She is really a big deal in Germany's black beauty and fashion industry. And she's been hugely successful in proving the blindingly obvious to her financial backers. That is, black-owned businesses have a huge customer base. So she launched her first site with just 300 euros, pushed it to 50 grand in revenue quite quickly, used that money to launch a second project. She's now working with some amazing global fashion and design brands all over the world. And the sort of audience she's targeting are like her. I would like to say like us, but I don't want to make any vague promises. But definitely young, mobile, tech-savvy people. And the expectations from technology is that it fits seamlessly into their lives, right? So she chose a platform to build her website, the first one and the second one, that promises design freedom, customizable templates, and whatnot for all her needs. And the result? Only 10% of her mobile user experiences, on her websites, over the past 12 months have been consistently good, right? You can do the maths and see which ones were not consistently good. And this means slow loading times. This means poor interactivity, janky user experience. And that's exactly the opposite of what her audience wants and expects. And the moral is that, regardless of what platform I'm not naming here, all of us, on the Google side, on the web platform side, us in the developer community, at Drupal, other open source platforms, not just open source platforms, we must admit, while we were successful in some respects, we have failed to provide Nana and her customers and others like her with a transparent, safe, and easy guardrails to create a compelling, powerful, and delightful user experience. That's just a fact. Right? That's where we are. Very few platforms, if any, right now, provide clear performance guarantees. Why? Because for the longest time, it hasn't been easy. We haven't been properly focused on performance, really. I hope that focus comes into the Drupal community now with more of talks and workshops like this, and generally a little bit more of a drumbeat around it. But also, we had very few concrete guidelines. It's very hard to put your finger on what performance is and what it isn't, and how do you go about fixing it. So our aim today is to dive a little bit deeper into, well, defining it, and then looking at how we can go about tracking it and fixing it, specifically in general, but also specifically, very much specifically on Drupal. Performance is crazy difficult and complicated to define. And if you have other definitions, please throw them in the chat. That will give us some fodder for discussion later. But for the purposes of trying to make some kind of sense of it, we can split it into 3 areas, right, on the site. And that's probably the stuff that we're leaving out of here, but this is at least reasonably comprehensive and gives us enough to start digging into. Is it happening? Is it coming? Are the bytes coming on the screen? Are the main bytes coming on the screen? Can you do something with those bytes, like with the text that's on the screen, the button that's on the screen? Can you do something with it? And does it bring you joy, right? As Naomi Kondo would say. But technically speaking, this is all about visual stability, but visual stability is boring. To me, this is just like this. The whole experience of this is this pleasant? Is this an interaction with a website that makes my day? Or is this an interaction I'll be talking about for the next couple of days, telling everybody how horrible it made me feel and how much of my time it wasted? So to sum up, this is how we're looking at performance. And this is what we're calling performance. It's somewhat interchangeable with user experience on a page, somewhat interchangeable with what Google search calls page experience, although that includes a couple of other aspects as well. But let's go with this. Let's roll with this for now. Is it happening? Is it responsive? And does it spark joy through stability? All right. Okay, we'll say, okay, these 3 are reasonably independent of each other and fairly comprehensive in what they describe, although they don't have experience. How does that help us? That helps us in a way that it allows us then to pick what can we measure about any of those 3 that allows us to be numerical, specific, and tactical about understanding them and fixing them. And the metrics that were introduced to measure them are these, right? And I'll go over each of them very quickly now as well. So largest contentful paint is all about the bytes on the screen. Are the main bytes that I came there to see, are they there? Is it a picture? Is it a header image? Is it a bunch of text? Whatever it is that I came to the page to see and do, is it there? And how quickly does it get there? The numbers, the thresholds, are empirically defined through studies and experience, and they will change, I assume. They haven't changed since they've been introduced, but they will change, right? Because as the internet changes, as the web becomes better, those thresholds hopefully will keep moving up. Right? So what now is considered to be a great experience, maybe a couple of years from now will be considered a mediocre experience as everybody moves up. But for now, they've been here for the past couple of years, as far as I can recall. And basically, yeah, that's what it is. You could call it an arbitrary threshold, but it's not quite arbitrary. It's based on real user data and research. Same with FID. FID is all about interactivity. It's, in simple terms, once you've tapped the button, how long does it take the website to respond? Right? Is it busy? Is the main thread busy doing other things? Are there like tens of other scripts downloading in the background that prevent that button from responding to you? That delay, right? And you, obviously, as a developer, you want to reduce that delay as much as you can. Luckily, from what I've been seeing so far, FID is probably across the world one of the ones that people have the least problems with, but that's not to say that people don't have problem with that either, right? So definitely something to keep an eye on. And lastly, the joy metric, the one that is very often the most difficult to get fixed, because we've been so about just letting random, especially third-party stuff appear on our websites that just does things to our content and our context, just shift it around without the user wanting it, then it's quite hard to disentangle all of that and bring it back down to where it should be. Luckily, today we'll be looking at a little bit of what you can do from the ground up to just make the right choices in the first place. But then you need to have discipline, not to let that good work go to waste. And the way you calculate CLS is quite simple, right? It's by how much has that content shift. It's not just up and down, it's also to the sides and whatever. Any content shifting that is not user-generated is calculated here through the lifetime of the page, as long as it's open, the tab is open. Right, so there's three, right? And you remember how they match. LCP goes to how fast the bytes are loading, FID, how fast the bytes are responding, and CLS to how much the bytes are moving on the screen. And if you really want to question how and why these were chosen and at these thresholds, check out the links, make some screenshots now, check them out later to dig deeper into what the vitals are, what core vitals are, how the thresholds were chosen, and so on. Quick word about tooling, right? Because you'll need this. There are a bunch of tools, and they cause a bunch of confusion as well. I'm hoping to set the record clear here, and there's about 40 of us right now here on the. I don't know if that doesn't include you and me, Michael. So there's like 39 people actually watching us. I like that. Call all your friends. This is the important bit, because this is where I get the most questions, and this is where most people get confused. There are a bunch of tools out there. That's true, and I can see how that can cause confusion. But all those tools are necessary because they deliver different things. Let's start with the first one. So Lighthouse is a lab tool. That means it allows you to synthetically measure data in a controlled environment. It is available through different interfaces. It is available through Chrome Devtools. It is available through PageSpeed Insights, which we'll touch upon in a second. It is available. You can even download and run from your own machine through a CLI, right? It will always give you different responses depending on where you're running it from, because obviously, it's a bot that goes and tries to download bytes from a server. It will get them in different times, and different things will happen depending on where you're running them from. If you run it from the same environment, you will get reasonably consistent results, although still with some variation. What you must understand is that what you use it for is to test the changes that you make. Changes happen to your website, you look at Lighthouse. You make another change, you look at Lighthouse again. Did it go up? Did it go down? Right? Ideally, you integrate it into production, so even before you roll out changes, you start understanding it. Then you have field data from actual users. It can be collected in multiple ways. Chrome collects it, anonymizes it. So first of all, it collects only data. So the limitations here. It only collects it from users who have allowed Chrome to collect it. And then it anonymizes it, meaning that if there's very few users on a given page, it won't collect that data. Right? So there needs to be enough users there for that set to be anonymous. If those two conditions are met, so the permission and ability to anonymize it, then Chrome has the ability to log it. The three metrics, remember, exactly what were they for any given session, and then give it back to you, right? It's all publicly available. Chrome UX Dash is a nice starting point to access the data through Data Studio, but you can literally do it any way you like. You Google Chrome User Experience Report, there's plenty of entry points into the database. It's all in BigQuery. Use whatever tool you prefer to access it. And then the two of them combined are offered to you through PageSpeed Insights. So PageSpeed Insights is not a tool in itself, so to speak. It's a surface through which Lighthouse scores and Chrome user experience data, plus some recommendations, are presented. That's important to remember. A few additional ones, I'll breeze through them relatively fast, unless there's questions from the audience. Search Console, if you're signed up for that, is a useful place to get Crux data. Right? It's exposed through there, but it's only obviously for people who are signed up for Search Console, so not for everybody. Chrome Devtools, if you're using Chrome to debug, allows you to use Lighthouse. So even if you're not using Chrome to debug, maybe just spin it up just for this purpose, so you have the ability to check the audits in Chrome Devtools for Lighthouse. There is an extension for Chrome called Web Vitals, right? Allows you to see sort of in real time what the vitals are for any given page that you happen to be browsing. I don't know how useful it is for development. It's probably more useful for you to get an idea of what performance looks like in the wild at a glance, as you just keep browsing the net. Tell you a secret, at the moment it doesn't look great. And finally, there's a tool that you can actually use on your website. It's a very small library you can install that allows you to capture core web vitals from your visitors, right? Regardless of the browser. It's very important. There's nothing do with Chrome anymore. This is your own JavaScript. It's very small, so it in itself doesn't degrade performance, but it allows you to capture core web vitals and create your own tables and your own dashboards with your own data. That's going to be the most precise and the most up-to-date data you can get. And I can't stress enough how important it is to do this. There are other third-party tools. It's easy to find them. Just look for Real User Monitoring or RUM, and you'll find plenty of third-party tools that do it for you, creating pretty dashboards and all sorts of things for you. You can go that way, or you can try to do it yourself with webvitals.js. Now, the best part of any live event, a live demo, right? I've created a slide just in case the demo wouldn't work, but let me try to show the tab live anyway. So this is supposed to be for Drupal.com. How do I switch? Hop in. Okay, let me stop sharing for a second and then restart sharing. It doesn't, for some reason, let me seamlessly switch between tabs. Never mind. We'll be with you in a second. Okay. Nope, that's not the one that I wanted to share. Weird. Doesn't let me share the tab that I most want to share. Combination of live event pressure and I wouldn't say lack of familiarity with Hopin. I've been inside Hopin enough times by now, over the past couple of years, but still I not its biggest fan. Hopefully this is the right. This is the.
Yeah, looks good.
Looks good. It's not quite the site that I wanted to show. As it happens, it probably is a Drupal page. I'm not exactly sure. Doesn't matter at this point. It doesn't matter if it's Drupal or not Drupal. The point here is also I didn't want to specifically call anybody out or put anybody on the spot. So like, don't go chasing after you in HCR after this. All I want to do is show you how I would use PSI. So the first thing I would do is to ignore the big circle number at the very top, right? You'd think people would put it there for you to pay attention to it, but I highly encourage you not to look at it. Like whatever you do, don't look at don't press the big red button and don't look at the big number in the circle on PSI. We'll talk about that big number afterwards, but bear with me. When you first go there, you see at the very top, well, sort of not at the very top, because at the very top you have the big number, but just below that you have field data. This is what you should look at if it's available. So in this case, we have data available both for the page in itself, so the URL has enough. Wim, if you connect me with your customer, I will gladly do that. And also, this is being recorded. All these sessions are being recorded. I see the little red recording circle. So yes, show them this, show them any of my previous keynotes, and show them anybody from Google talking about it. Actually, there's an amazing article. Once Michael starts doing his thing, I'll find the link and paste it here. Just recently, Philip Walton talked about how we should be talking about lab and field data, including to customers, and hopefully that will be quite useful to you as well. Now, if the URL has enough data, and I've explained how the data is collected, you'll have some field data here. Cool, you got the 3 core web vitals plus FCP thrown in for good measure, so you get a base understanding of like what's happening with LCP. Is LCP, for example, here we can see like FCP isn't so great, so the first byte isn't being delivered very fast, but LCP is still within reason. So maybe there's other things you can need to work on other than when the first byte comes in. It's just at first glance how you would understand where your problems are. Plus, again, right, this allows you to identify what you really need to be working on. Your FID, in this example, is great. Don't worry about FID. Just forget about it for now. Your CLS and your LCP are more difficult. Well, figure out what's causing them, right? And then you have here an origin summary for the entire website, which is also quite useful. Quite often, you might not have data for the specific URL, but you will have data for the entire website. That's also a useful place. Again, here, interesting. The homepage has no exhibits, or it's not a homepage, but this particular URL exhibits no issues with CLS. The website on the whole exhibits severe issues with CLS. So there must be other sections. So that's a starting point, an entry point for your analysis. Other points in the website have issues with CLS, you should dive into that. And only after you've seen all of this data, only after you've understood the lab situation, or the field situation, sorry, the real user data, should you dive into lab data, right? Because this is just for this session. This is throttled to 3G on a mobile, and lots of other caveats, lots of other conditions here. So these numbers, they're not meaningless. They're meaningful in the sense that you can compare them time after time. After you make improvements, you can come back here and check what it's doing, and you will get reasonable consistency within reason, and be able to see, okay, what I'm doing improving stuff or not. Right? The real proof of that improvement will always be in the field data above. Right? So the lab data is always going to be sort of this tentative feeling right now of what you're getting and what you're not getting. And in that context, you can go back and look at the big circled number at the top and say, okay, has it moved? Did I change something? Did it move? Because otherwise, there is a good correlation. And even in this example, I'm quite confident to say, yeah, that's about what I would say. It correlates with the field data. The field metrics need some improvement, and that's what 65 seems to indicate. But there's plenty of examples where lab data is at 100 and the field data is tanking, and vice versa. So really be careful about this. And you're right again, Wim, when talking to your clients, we need to find a way to quickly and succinctly explain them how this happens and why this happens. But I think this is enough from me. I'll pass the word over to Michael to introduce himself again, and maybe start diving a little bit deeper into, okay, now that we understood all of this and the tooling, how do we do stuff on Drupal, right? And let me bring back the slides if I can. Can I do that? I hope I can. And then, no, these are not the slides that I'm looking for. Okay, while I'm fiddling with the slides, Michael, go ahead.
All right.
Take over.
All right. Thank you, Andre, for this introduction. Yeah, hello, everybody. My name is Michael. I'm the CTO and founder of amazeeio. And today we want to talk about how to improve the core web vitals with Drupal. Yeah, some people realized already I'm outside. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm actually this week at the balloon fiesta. So you will see back here, there is currently a hot air balloon rising, and there's 400 others gonna go up behind me in the next couple of minutes. Yes, I'm here with a friend of mine that is also a web engineer that flies a balloon. And I'm helping them setting up their the balloon and trying to get them on the ground again. So yes, but when Andre asked me to do a workshop about core web vitals, specifically with Drupal, I said, hey, yes, of course, the crew can do it one day without me, and we're gonna do that. So yes. What do we want to talk about today? Like we've heard, we want to learn a bit how to improve the core web vitals on a Drupal site. And so if I will try to take over the screen sharing, let's see if this works. Yes, can you see my screen? Perfect. All right. So, of course, the big question is like, okay, what type of site are we actually using? And so I decided to use the Umami, which is a demo installation from Drupal, which has a couple of pictures on it. It has a couple of pages. It's multilingual. So it should really be a good case to show some of the things that are possible. But the most important things we need to understand is every site is going to be completely different. So the things that maybe will work on this site to improve some of the metrics doesn't mean that this will automatically work on your site as well, or even the sites can be very different. But it will allow us to go in and for you to maybe see how to actually use these tools and how to interact with them. So what I'm going to use is, or I installed this Umami just on our hosting infrastructure of amazeeio, and we're going to use the Lighthouse core Chrome tools. Like Andre mentioned, this does not actually have any field data. So this is only lab data that we're going to use, because this site, Elizabeth, was started yesterday. So this doesn't have any field data. It's not actually used by anybody except me right now. So we don't really have any field data for it. We only have lab data. The good thing is, though, the lab data we can immediately recreate every single time we change something. And while the field data, we're going to have to wait a couple of days on an actual website that is used. So it's really this balance between you use the lab in your browser or via the Chrome, by the Page Insights website for the actual development. But this is all running in my own browser on local. Now, before we actually jump in, I want to also talk a bit about the hosting infrastructure. So a lot of people, and as a hosting company ourselves, they always ask, like, shouldn't performance be completely handled by the hoster? And as a lot of times in technology, the answer is, it depends. And so, but here we can actually see an example of how the hosting infrastructure does a little bit helping in terms of performance, but the big part is actually going to be the application themselves. So I have this here. This is running on our infrastructure. And on the Another tab, I have running one in SimplyTest.me. So SimplyTest, for the people that don't know, SimplyTest is a website that you can super easily shortly start a Drupal website. And one of them is also the Umami demo. And now SimplyTest, of course, is not optimized for hosting or performance. It's optimized to shortly test a Drupal site. So they obviously don't have all the high performance improvements on their servers that like a Drupal hosting company like ours has. And so if we actually compare the two, and like Andre said, don't only look at this number above here, the 87 versus 81, but we actually need to also look at the different metrics. Or if we go deeper, we can see a bit lower here that, for example, there is no cache timeline or cache TTL sent by this server. So all these pictures, they don't have a cache TTL, meaning the browser will maybe not cache the site. While on our site, we spend a lot of time in figuring out what are the best cache headers to be sent. And for example, the cache error here or the cache diagnostic is all fine because we automatically send correct cache headers for all the assets. So basically, what I want you to take you from this part is, yes, the hosting infrastructure has to do with it, but just a tiny little bit. The biggest part actually has to do with the website or the application themselves. And therefore, let's throw this away and let's focus on this specific one. So in this result here, which by the way was done for the mobile, every time that you run a test, it asks you, do you want to check for mobile on the desktop? The desktop is always better. Why? Well, because desktop have much better internet connections than a mobile, and so the desktop results usually are better. So what I always do, I always run them with mobile. So because that's when you have really well optimized for mobile, you will get really good results also on desktop. While on the other way around, it's not always going to be the case. So the results we see here is that overall, I would say we're doing okay-ish. But it's definitely a lot to improve. And the couple of things is, you see the first contentful pane took 3 seconds. The speed index itself is 3.6 seconds. So overall, people are roughly waiting 3 seconds before the website can actually be used. And that's on a mobile is okay-ish, but it would be much better. And so what is really great now, Lighthouse does not only tell us where we're lacking, but it also tells us what to actually do. So it tells us about opportunities. What should we do to improve? And we see here we have 3 pieces for this specific website that it tells us. And the first one is serve images in next generation formats. Basically, PNG or JPEG should not be used anymore. Today in the web, we should all use either WebP or AFIF or AVIF, which really are better image formats that are better compressible and also much better to be sent via the internet to your browser. And so we have all, and it actually tells you every single picture that should be improved. And so we're going to look at this. The other one is properly sized images. We will see later when we go into the code that actually some images are sent much bigger to my browser, but my browser will actually show them smaller because the CSS definition says show it much smaller. And so that's also, we lose some performance there in order to do that. And the last one is render blocking resources. So some parts in the loading of your browser is blocking, or render blocking, meaning the browser has to in this case, it's a CSS file. So the browser actually has to download the CSS file first and has to completely parse the CSS file before before the browser can continue rendering the site. And so that's obviously blocking. And so that's also not very good. We're going to see that the third one is a bit harder to solve, but the first two ones are actually quite easy. And then there's a couple of other things, but I really would suggest to focus on these opportunities, because that's where you're going to make the biggest impact. And do more. If you have questions, just add them to the chat. Well, we'll see if there's any balloons. They're all coming. Okay, so let's continue. So the first one I want to focus on is this Webp. Now, this one is actually quite easy to solve, because Drupal has a module already that you can teach Drupal to use Webp instead of JPEG. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to open the same website in my Firefox. The other important thing is always do the testing logged out. If you're logged in, the Lighthouse tool will test the site as logged user, which your performance will be worse. Now, maybe your site is very logged in, then definitely test it logged in. But in our case here, I don't need to the users of this website will all visit them anonymous, so I will test it anonymous. So I will log here on my Chrome to go into the Drupal module, the Drupal settings. And the first thing I will do, I will enable one specific module, which is called Webp. Now, this module, which is the image API optimized Webp, if we shortly Google for this, we can see it on Drupal.org. So this is a module that was built by Michael Lender, and this is a module that works together with the image API optimized module, where you can automatically teach Drupal that it should use the Webp processor. Now, important is your hosting infrastructure, again, needs to support Webp. So it depends on which hosting infrastructure you use. This might not work, but it's super, super easy to enable. So I basically just clicked. I downloaded the module in the background, and installed these two. And yes, it will mean that I also need to install another module. I will do this. And so basically, this module will allow us just to set that every image should automatically be sent as Webp. That's the important part. It's additionally. So it's not going to completely replace JPEGs or PNGs. It's going to do this additionally, so that the browser can actually decide, oh, I'm supporting Webp, so I want to download the Webp version. Or maybe you have a browser that doesn't support this. And so the browser will then download the JPEG. So we installed the module, and now I need to configure it. So in this optimize image API optimize, there's a new setting here that is called the pipelines. And these pipelines allow me to create pipelines, so different steps to optimize the images additionally. Now, there's a lot of different pipelines out there that are support, but we just want to create a new one, and we call it the Webp. And in this pipeline, we're now selecting a processor, which is the Webp deriver. So this will automatically ask me to, or this will automatically do the Webp. Now it asks me about the image quality. I would suggest to leave it at 75. Yes, it's super easy to say, oh no, I want 100% quality all the time. But this will really, really, really make the pictures much bigger, and you will see a direct impact in your core Web Vitals in terms of performance. So I really suggest let's start with 75, and if you can definitely play with it and change this over time, and really it's a good spot where suddenly the website gets, or the core Web Vitals get less good based on the image quality. So we'll add this, and we have configured our pipeline. Like I said, there is many others, and you however you want. Now, this though, because we just created a pipeline, we actually also need to change the image styles. So the image styles, for anybody to know, in Drupal allows you to tell Drupal to create automatically different sizes of images. And Umami uses this heavily. So we have all these different image sizes in here. And we need to tell them that we want to use this now Webp pipeline. Now, there's a couple of them, so this will take a bit. But basically, we need to open all of them in a new tab. And I will start from the bottom, and we need to tell each of them that to use the Webp. So when we're on the image style itself, this is where we set the scaling, and at the bottom we can now say, hey, please use the Webp pipeline, because this will generate us the Webp images. So I will shortly click through this. And I opened each of them in a new tab, so this is going to be a bit faster. Now, you only have to do this once, luckily. And also, if you add a new image still after you enable the image optimized pipeline, it will automatically be selected for you. So it's not something you have to do. It's just at the very beginning, when you install the module the very first time, this is something that we're going to have to do. Do all of this. All right, now let's go back. It actually shows us here, there's a new column now that shows us which of them have which pipeline. So I'll see I missed one here, and there's a couple of other ones that I haven't done yet. So I click edit on each of them. There's one here. We should have renamed workshop to Clicking with Michael. And we're getting there.
It's not too late yet. We can still rename it.
How to click, how to change something real fast. It's at the point that I always
How's everybody
like.
I was just going to ask, how's everybody doing? Are you following along? You're able to replicate any of this? Like, any questions around any of this? Obviously, you can't respond by voice, unfortunately, on Hopin, but maybe in chat. Or maybe like a couple of thumbs up if you actually are fine and everything makes sense so far.
Yeah, people are saying that my cam is lagging. Yeah, I'm in the middle of nowhere. So, Vlad, if you can't hear me, reload the tab. All right, so what I've done now, I set all of them onto Webp. And now is the time to run it again. What I do suggest, though, if you change anything in Drupal, to be really sure that everything has been changed, maybe clear the caches just on the Drupal site to make sure that everything, that all the caches has been reloaded. And after this is done, I will now go back to my Chrome, and I will reload the page here as well. And all right, now we can actually see if this has changed anything. So I will select an image here. For example, this image here, the Fury chili sauce. And we can see in here that now in this picture tag, we now have a source for one of a .jpeg.webp, and we also have a source of just .jpeg. So that's what I talked about before, where the browser can now decide which of the two are going to be used. And if we go to the network tab and just filter images, and I reload here, we can see my Chrome decides to use the Webp version fully automatically, because Chrome knows, okay, Webp will have a better experience in downloading the image and rendering it than JPEG, and so it will automatically prefer the Webp version. I see some people having issues with my screen share. Let me shortly stop the screen share and just do this again.
I'm not entirely sure what this is down to, but I could follow along nicely, and I see both the screen that you're sharing and yourself Although you do keep
Yeah,
freezing now.
yeah.
again,
If you
but then
have some
come back.
issues with Hopin, what my experience is, just reload the tab. So let your Hopin connect newly, and that usually solves most of the problems. All right, so we have done that, and now, of course, we want to run a core Web Vitals again. So I'm going back to my Lighthouse. I say generate report. I just need performance right now, and I just want to run it on mobile. All right, and we have this now. One of the things we have to see now, you see that the performance actually went down, the number, and I think that's what Andre before mentioned is with the number. Like, don't focus too much on this specific number. Look into the opportunities, because like myself, I'm tethering through my phone, and so the performance is always going to be different based on how fast the internet is. And the fact that I'm currently streaming to all of you also doesn't make it much better. So don't focus on that number much more. Focus on the bottom here on the opportunities. And one of the things we see is that the surf images in XGen formats now is actually orange, and we see that only one of the images has it left. And so now let's look at this. Why is this image? So this image is still loaded as JPEG. So if I actually go and look for this image here, and I go to the elements and I search for this one, and so we can see that this image is actually loaded as a background image of a CSS file. And so, and in here, it still uses the .jpeg version and not the .webp. And so that's obviously one part that the WebP module cannot automatically do this for us. That's really a piece that would need to be done in theming. But all the other images that we saw before in the Web Vitals tools, they have been improved a lot. So that's they are now downloaded as WebP. So we already have done some improvement there. And so that's really, it's not. Don't expect that just installing a couple of modules and clicking around in Drupal will solve all your problems. Some of these things really mean that you have to maybe change some of your theming, some of your modules. If you have a custom module, you maybe need to change some of them here. So in this specific case, with this image, we really need to look in like, okay, where is this background image actually set? And can we maybe add a WebP image in there automatically? But that's, again, code-based. But some of the things we definitely improved. Now, the other one I want to look at is this properly sized images. So Lighthouse tells us that some of the images have been downloaded are like 140 kilobytes, 85 kilobytes, but there's a lot of potential savings. So let's look at one of these. So I'm going to copy the name of this again, of this image. And I'm going to go to the elements, and I'm searching for that one. Oh no, let's actually not that one. Sorry, that's the same image that we just talked about. Let's use the next one, the brownies. So if I search for this one, all right. So this is the image. We can shortly check. Okay, we have two sources. We have one WebP and one .jpeg. So that's good. That's what we want. But if we actually hover over this image here, we can see in the rendered size, it tells us 552 by 368 pixels, while the intrinsic size is 1,500 by 1,024. So what this means is that the image actually has been downloaded, or the downloaded image was 1,500 times 1,000 pixels, while the rendered image was only 500 times 360 pixels. So something is off here. So the HTML code tells us download a really big image, but then we're only showing it as a really small one. When we see here, the image is not like 1,400 would be the whole screen size, but here it's much, much smaller. So something is off, and we can actually look inside of Drupal what is going on there. So we see that this is the large 3.2 image style that is used here. And so if we go over to our Firefox where we're logged in, and we go to the image, to the responsive image styles. This is one of the 3.2 images. And we can see that Drupal actually says, hey, there's 4 different images that can be sent. So this is a responsive image where the browser automatically decides which one to download. And there are these really big images here that are quite big compared to what actually is shown. So I will disable them here because I don't want the HTML code to include them. And if I go back after I save this and I go back to my brownies picture, now we can see that the image that was downloaded was 600 by 400 and it was rendered by 550 by 368. So the image is now roughly the size that has been sent by the HTML, how it is shown now to the page. And if we now run another Lighthouse, we can see that the properly sized images, we now only have one of them left. This is the really big image that we talked about before. So that's one of them that we individually have to look at, but all the other images, they're all gone. And so now the Lighthouse tool tells us, hey, these are the correct sizes. Now, I have to say, though, the change that I just did just had to do with the start page. It could totally be that this image style, this 3.2 image style, that this is used somewhere else on the website where the image is actually shown much bigger, and now there it will be pixelated. So it's not just, you cannot just based on one single site decide, oh, I'm going to change this and this will solve all my problems. You really have to understand how your website is used, how your image styles are used, and if they really make sense. The other thing is, if you have like any device with a retina screen, if you send the image the same size that the actual pixel shows, it will be a little bit blurry. So for retina screens, you actually want to send pictures that are a little bigger than they actually are, because the screen will look much better. But again, this is like we talked about before, about the percentage of image styles. It's really a balance between what makes sense in terms of sending big images and that it will look really good, or having really fast websites. So it's really something where you have to find a balance. But the Lighthouse tool will allow you to tweak the changes and look at them immediately and figure out what is possible or not. Okay, before we go further, I want to shortly stop here and see if there are any questions up until now, because we looked at just enabling Webp, which was pretty fast, but also the image styles. All right, Wim has a question. How do you tackle the score impact of layout shift on lazy loaded images in Drupal? We created a system that automatically adds a width and height attribute image, but maybe there's another solution. No, I think you actually did the right way. So the problem that Wim talks about is that usually you want to lazy load images, which means that the browser will actually not load every single image at the very beginning of the page load. It will only load them while you're starting scrolling. So let's say you have a huge website with a lot of images. And why do you need to load the 50th image at the very bottom of the page? Because the browser cannot see it yet. And so the other problem is, though, the browser needs to still know which size that this image will use in the future. And so when it then is actually loaded, and that is what width and height attributes to the images are required. There is actually a Drupal core issue currently. Let me see if I can find this. Responsive image width height. So today, yes. So today, if you use responsive images in Drupal, they will not have automatically a width and a height in there. So therefore, if you use lazy loading, it could have these layer shifts that we really want to prevent, because these are the ones that are really frustrating for the people or for our users. And so this image here, this issue here, I will say the chat. This is a core bug or a core fix that will add this in the future. So if you look at the code, I'll scroll all the way down here, and let's look at the last patch. So this one will add width and height settings to responsive images as well, so that lazy loading should work much better. It's not in core yet. If you are interested in this topic, I really encourage you to test this patch. And we see Alex says that he's already using this and it works great. So please add this also in here. So if you use it, log in to Drupal.org and tell people that, hey, I'm using this and it works great, because these are really big changes we're talking about here. Like changing something in core affects thousands or 100,000s of websites all over the world. And so we really want to be sure that before we do such a change that it works. And so really take the time to show, to try it out and tell everybody that it works. But yeah, so Wim, this should really, this should help with lazy loading, and in my understanding is this is really the correct way. All right, the next question was from Richas. The opportunity, reduce initial server response time. Let's look at that one. I'm not sure if probably that one. It's hard to find where the optimization required. What are the best practices you're following to identify whether optimization required on the server level or the application level? Okay, yes. So what Richard is referring to here is really about how long does it take the server to respond. And this can, as you mentioned, this can have to do with a lot of different pieces. I would suggest to use a tool like either New Relic, which is paid, or Blackfire. They have a free subscription where you really can look into the PHP execution of your Drupal. That really tells you how much code or how long does the Drupal really have to take to serve your the first response. The other pieces that you can look at is all kind of different caching. Now, this workshop, unfortunately, is not so much about caching, because this will take another 2 or 3 hours, but there's all kind of different caching layers in Drupal that you can enable. Plus, also, you can use external caching systems like CDNs, Varnish, things like that. But in the end, yes, it's not a one solution fits all. Unfortunately, it's really something that you have to look at. Is it the server infrastructure that is maybe slow, and can I improve it with a CDN, or do I have too many Drupal modules enabled, and then like a Drupal bootstrap will just take very long? So it's really dependent on that. But unfortunately, I cannot give you a one answer. If you're interested to learn more or talk about this more, send me an email, and I'm happy to sit together and we can look at your specific case to improve it as well. All right, Wim said he's going to look at that core patch and we'll test it out. That's great. Thank you. All right. So the last piece that I want to look into here is about CSS blocking. And I can already tell you I spent quite some time yesterday to check if we can do anything there. And it's not so easy out of the box. Yes, there is actually Lighthouse tells us about this advac module, which is the advanced CSS and JavaScript aggregation. As a hosting company, I really have to tell you, we had customers that really, really destroyed their website with this module. It has a lot of configuration capabilities, and you can really, really misconfigure your site. So this one needs a lot of testing before you're really going to use this one. And so therefore, I'm not going to show you here, because again, it will take just too much time to use any of this. But give it a try, test it out, but test it out really, really well. And don't just like go there and enable every single module that you find and just hope it will make you better. Really use each module individually, test them, see how they behave, and really make sure that it does not destroy your website, because there are definitely configure settings in this module that can really take down your site. All right, so now we talked around an hour, and we really want to give you also the possibilities to play everything in there. And actually, Xiao, he just said, also important to note that most CDNs replace AdVec more efficiently. That's correct, yes. If you have a CDN, a lot of cases, the AdVec is actually not necessary at all anymore. And also how Oliver said, yes, so some parts are also outdated. That's also correct. Yes, it's a module that has a lot of things in it, and really use it sparsely. There are some pieces that can make it better. For example, you can tell it to like prefetch some DNS stuff and things like that. That's really good. But some other parts can really make your site slower. So like I said before, be really careful in using it. All right, so we talked about an hour. Now we want to give you a bit of stage and let you play around. So what we did is, and let me shortly find this in here. I will shortly stop my screen sharing. So if you click all on this link that I sent in the chat, what this is basically, and I will share my screen again so we can see this. All right. Nope. Share screen. There we go. Okay, so what we created is basically the site that I just used. We deployed this 50 times on our hosting infrastructure. And you can use now any of these. Now, before you start using them, please add your name in column E, that we know you claimed that specific site. Not that we're starting to override each other's configuration, because that wouldn't be fun. So choose any of them, use your most liked number, and the user is always admin, password admin, and you can play with that. So you can basically do what I just did. Visit the site, use your Chrome with the Lighthouse and the page speed testing, or use the page speed insights that you can use online if you don't have a Chrome, and play with them. Try out. The Webp module is already there, like you saw before. It's not installed. So if you want to use it, you have to install it in the Drupal settings. But beside of that, yeah, go in it, try out, play with it, use it as much as you want. And I will, if there are some questions, I can show it again, what I just did. But I think, yes, now it's really like for the next 10 to 20 minutes, everybody can play with this. And if you have any questions, go to the chat and ask right away, and we can answer questions.
I see some folks claiming the links already. That's cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 6 that I can see on your screen.
And while this happens, we're going to look at some balloons. Okay.
Oh man, they're launching. That is incredible. That's like the most exciting online conference I've been to for the past couple of years. Sure. 20 people in the spreadsheet other than you and me.
Perfect.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 people already claiming. Thanks everybody for being hands-on. We really bet big on this one, and I'm happy it's working out. Let us know, for example, one first thing that we could try to check is just as a proof of the volatility of lab data, give us a sense of what sort of a Lighthouse score you get if you run it on this install from Chrome Developer Tools on your machine. right? Because I remember, Michael, I think when you first spun it up, you had something like 86 for the vanilla version before you optimized it, right? Oh my God, your background looks insane.
Yeah, it's very volatile, and it definitely has to do with the internet connection. So like yesterday, when I prepared everything without streaming, I usually had like 87 to 95 sometimes. Now with the whole streaming, it definitely goes lower. So yeah, it's definitely not something like. I mean, I know how it works. In the end, we want to show our customers like nice numbers. So I'm not telling you just run it 10 times and use the best number that you got, but just be aware, yes, it is going to be volatile depending on the internet connection that you're using.
Talking about showing stuff to customers, I mean, I guess we have a couple of perspectives here. One is when you're trying to win business and trying to show that you know your stuff and you're doing the right thing, and then you can achieve a certain score and you want to convince somebody with that. Oh, fair enough. That's one approach. But another point is that if you already have a customer that is trying to improve performance and you're not even trying to improve performance, trying to do the right thing for the business or the organization, and you are responsible, or you have a customer or you're in-house and you're responsible for driving that forward, then you definitely don't want to be screwing around with lab data. You use it for your own purposes to track evolution over time, but you certainly want to look at field data to see how things are actually happening. And the second point is that, I don't know, luckily or unluckily, I don't know, I don't want to get into that, but I haven't mentioned this when I was doing the briefing, but I'll mention this briefly now since we have a couple of minutes. Platforms like Google Search are using Webp Vitals as a signal, right? Because where previously the assessment of performance was a little bit of a black box, now they're quite transparently saying, well, you know what, we're available. We're going to look at Webp Vitals to see how fast or slow any given page is, or actually not so in fast or slow, but how well it is performing, right? Because it's not just about speed. And that's a big decision driver for many business and organization owners and decision makers that I've seen. It has its downside because people start chasing this illusion of winning and ranking just because of it, which is not going to happen. But on the plus side, this enables you to say, well, not only is performance critical for your actual user experience, what platforms look at is not your lighthouse data. What platforms look at is your field data where it's available. So we need to make sure that that is actually working. And there's been some interesting research. I'm going to throw another link in here. If you haven't seen it before, I'm going to find it in a second and send it to you. There's a CMS Webp Vitals report out there based on HTTP archive data showing how different platforms perform with respect to each other. It's fascinating. Drupal isn't doing so badly, but also there's still a lot of room for improvement. You basically lost my train of thought where I was going with that. I'll give you the research anyway, but I guess what I was trying to say is you really only, in the end, you really only care about what the impact on your users was, because that impacts the bottom line of whatever organization that you have, whether it's commercial or non-commercial. It's not even important, because that's always some sort of a bottom line. You're always trying to grab attention. You're always trying to convert people into doing something. And that's where performance really, really matters. And some people sometimes take the short-term view of like, okay, I just need to win some business, optimize a website, and I'm done. But I hope most of you are not in that mindset. And then, of course, tracking field data over time and seeing how it improves and having an impact there is really what matters. You got the question from... Yeah, Joao says, I told you not to look at the number. Yeah, exactly. I'm telling you to look at the number now, only to see that, for example, you got a 59. Vlad had a 45 logged in, 85 logged out. We had an 86 here in the beginning. It's going to be all over the shop, right? You can't compare. Two developers looking at the same website in the Chrome developer tools will have completely different numbers. It's meaningless to compare that. And it's almost meaningless to show it to a customer unless you give them the right context, saying, okay, I've run 10 tests. This is the worst score. This is the best score. This is what I'm hoping to improve over time. This is how it's going to change. That would make some sense, but just spurting out, oh, I've hit 90, oh, I've hit 100, doesn't mean anything, right? Because somebody else is going to hit 30 on the same website the same day. Alessandro is saying, that's probably more to you, Michael. Any opinions on fixing third-party render blocking resources other than scrapping them?
Yeah, what he refers to is that the Umami uses Google Fonts to load fonts externally, and there's a couple of things that you can do there. So the important piece that we need to understand, and I will share my screen again just so we can see this. So if I go to my Umami site again, and I inspect this, and actually if you look at the page source, so one of the things we see here is that in Drupal, Drupal by default puts the CSS at the very top, just for the fact that Drupal wants the browser to actually be render blocked. So it wants that it downloads the CSS first, and then parses the CSS first, understands all the CSS, and then when it actually parses or renders all this HTML at the bottom, it knows the CSS already. Now you could switch this, and that you could say, okay, load the CSS at the very bottom, but this means it will start to render the page without CSS, and then it will add the CSS later on, and so you have content switching, content shift again, which again is also not a good thing. So there's a couple of, and you see here that it loads the Google fonts. Now, the reason that this is loaded via, not via the servers, our own servers, but via Google Fonts, because it's just much easier than uploading the file, the fonts and stuff like that. And maybe somebody already has downloaded this font before, then it's already cached, and so it doesn't need to be downloaded a second time. But fonts are render blocking. Now, the best way would be is to actually put these fonts at the very bottom and make sure that we use a fallback font, which is very similar to the font itself. And so that when the browser renders it, it will first render it with a font that is maybe very similar, has the same size, and then later on it will fix it. That would make the third-party render blocking resources go away. In the end, though, the very best is actually to not use any external fonts. Yes, it's cool, it's fancy for customers to have their own font, but we really need to understand that this will be very taxing to download a whole font, to render it and stuff like that. So if you can get rid of it in any way, that would be really great. And so, yeah, so the answer is it really, really depends in your situations. What I would do in this specific case, I would put this CSS for the fonts at the very bottom, and I would define in the CSS files itself, I would define a fallback font that looks very similar to the actual font that is going to be used, which is, in this case, I'm actually not sure, which is Open Sans. And so, yeah, that would probably be the best, and that house also would like.
Michael, is there a way to preload fonts on Drupal? Like, could you do that if you wanted to? Because, I mean, preloading fonts that are critical for you is a solution.
Yes, I mean, yeah, that would be the other possibility. Yeah, that you, I think that's then in the, is it in the HTML tag, or how does the preloading from a technical point of view work? I'm actually not sure.
I'm going to look it up right now because I'm sure that it works, and you can preload. I think it goes into the header right on. I'll find the developer tooling, the developer documentation now. But question is, if you wanted to do this kind of editing on Drupal, is that easily available?
It's possible, yes. It's probably not like a module that you can download and does it automatically, but with code, like with your custom module, you could easily add additional stuff to the header tags or the header section of the HTML. Yeah, that's totally possible.
So here's a link to a code lab on Font Preloading, and I'm pulling up the actual dev docs that go with it.
Yes, yeah, it's link preload.
Yep.
Yeah, that would not be very hard to do this. I don't think there's a module out of the box that you would find in Drupal that does this, but yeah, with some custom code, you can easily do that.
Alex is asking how to deal with clients sticking in scripts via GTM. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you do need to boop some people on the nose, but hopefully in a constructive way. And I think, so number one, the folks in GTM are also trying hard to optimize for performance right now. It's a separate team from Chrome, and so they're doing their own thing, but they're also trying really hard to not be a cog in everybody's wheels, or like another cog, but rather a spoke in everybody's wheels. The way to, I'd say, address these issues with clients, marketing teams, and other teams that are using GTM is not to say I stay away from this, but there's two approaches. One is very at the high level with the decision makers. You need to show why performance matters critically for business use cases. And I'm going to drop another link into the chat in a second that's hopefully going to be useful for that, which is a study by Deloitte, which links performance directly to business results, such as revenue, conversions, that sort of stuff. It was done pre-COVID vitals, so it doesn't mention COVID vitals, but that's irrelevant, right? For the purposes of the conversation, you have a direct link between how fast the page performs, how fast it loads and delivers, and how much money the business is making. So that's a very solid argument to use right there. And then, so it's not to say, well, you know what, just abandon all measurement, abandon all third-party tags. You need to set performance budgets. And I'll drop another link about performance budgeting as well. Just like any other budgeting. You know, I mean, why don't the client buy a fleet of, 30 Teslas for a team of 10 people? Something in their head says, well, that's probably not what we need. We could do that, but we don't need to do that, right? And so it should be the same here. Like there's things that you need to do and things you don't need to do, and you need to have a way to compare them and balance them. And performance budgeting helps to visually connect with that idea really nicely. I'm gonna dig that up and put that into chat as well. Thanks, Alex. Chandra is asking for our slides. Ooh, okay, they're not very complicated, but yes, in that case, if there's interest, I'll figure out what to do. I'll probably put them somewhere up on a sharing space, and then how we're going to distribute them, I'm not sure. We didn't think about this beforehand. We'll figure out a way. Well, at least if you, at the very least, I'll post them on my Twitter, so you'll find them there. You don't need to follow unless you really want to, but you can always jump in there and just check out the link. I'll create it and post it after the event. You could, I think, yeah, maybe one way you could use them is to kind of maybe with your customers, with your clients, to explain why, like, what's going on and what is all this COVID vitals and performance talk is about. You can also show them this recording. It's going to be available. Nothing like extra views on the videos to make us feel good.
Yeah, and I think like overall, like we saw now a couple of links to this web.dev, and I think that's really like, if you have a couple of minutes time, like really look through there. Like a lot of stuff that we talked about, other people already talked a lot about. And so I think there's a lot of good resources there. Some of these things go way more technical in depth, like about the font loading. It explains you specifically how the browser decides when to load which font in which size and all these different things. So there's a lot of resources out there that you can look at.
Oh, also, I totally forgot to mention this while I was doing my live demo of PSI, of PageSpeed Insights. There are Drupal-specific recommendations that Lighthouse gives you, and they surface in PSI. Right? I'll show you also in a second where they are in GitHub. It's an entirely public repository. You can jump in and leave more recommendations of your own if you'd like, or ask questions about any of them. It's quite useful, right? Because also what it means is that you can, for issues that Lighthouse surfaces for you, you might have specific Drupal specific advice to resolve them. And they're all community sourced. So they were built, I'm not exactly sure, unfortunately, by whom in the community. We can look it up, right? It's visible on GitHub. Given how, I was quite inspired by Dries' keynote on open source. I don't know if any of you watched it, but this is what it's all about. This is us getting together and solving issues as a community together. So same thing here. If you find issues on Drupal that you have known solutions for that are not mentioned there, please upload them so other people will have this solution. And if you see issues for which there's no Drupal solution, well, that's a reason to work on them inside Drupal and then surface them through Lighthouse so that everybody knows how to fix that. I'll be loading. Oh God, where did everything go? Way too many tabs open. Yeah. Oh my God, the balloons.
Yeah, that just keep coming.
That just like I hope you kind of have a camera recording this so you can use it forever as your conference background. It is impossible to beat this.
Yeah, no, and it happens every morning. Like that's the crazy thing. Like all these pilots, they get up at 4 a.m. to be ready to launch at like 6:37, and yeah, that's what they do for 1 week. It's like DrupalCon, but just different, I guess.
Yeah, it's like DrupalCon, but with balloons. I know.
Yes,
it's almost entirely the same.
It's roughly the same amount of sleep. So.
Oh yeah.
Air Balloon Con, yes. Yeah, so if anybody wants to look it up, it's called the Balloon Fiesta. It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's once every year, and if you're ever close to this, I will highly suggest to go to it. Like, even if you're maybe not a balloonist or a balloon enthusiast, it's crazy. Seeing one hot air balloon in the air is cool, but seeing 400 at the same time is definitely a completely different ball game or balloon game.
So check it out. In the meantime, I found something about the slides. The slides that I used today were an abbreviated version of this deck. I hope the gods of Drupal are not very angry with me for posting a deck from a conference at another open source platform. But I hope there's enough open source communal spirit here not to hold any.
Don't worry. Yeah, no,
exactly.
Totally.
I'm half kidding. I know how this works. So at least I hope I do. Also to show that we at Google are really trying our best to rip ourselves apart and be present everywhere, relevant where we can be. And I'm really grateful to you, Michael, for doing this with me today. Like, it makes a world of difference to be able to do this hands-on. Also, part of it was that, as I said, we've talked about it, and I've talked about it, God knows, for many, many, many times. The difference between lab and field, and the importance of performance, and the impact on business, and the search, and stuff. And yet we still have some ways to go. So yeah. I think it's just amazing that you were able to show the folks here today and everybody who's going to watch this afterwards some hands-on tips on what to actually go and do. This is critical.
I think what is really cool for me is that, like, I mean, we talked about website performance now since many, many years. Like, I think I've done my first DrupalCon presentation 10 years ago about this topic. But the core Web Vitals didn't exist up until there. So there was all this discussion about time to first byte and like that and that and that. And like, so we were never really able to measure it, really. Now, today we learned it's still not full rocket, like still not fully figured out. Like, there's still like we said, depending on the internet speed and your browser version and things, there's still maybe different results, but at least it's much more measurable today. And also the really cool thing is that we not only have lab data, but also field data. That obviously makes a huge difference. And I think that's really something that we can now finally work against something, because everybody, I guess, agrees that faster websites are better, but we were never really able to measure it or have really data that to look at and decide what actually means fast. And I think today we have this with all the studies and all the time that was invested by Google and others to really get the bottom of, okay, what does it actually mean to have a fast website? What is it? Is it 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and all that data? So yeah, I highly encourage everybody to learn about the core Web Vitals, because it's just going to be used more. And as we as a society get more and more mobile, it's an even more important piece. And we have so many new people all over the world that are getting access to the internet, but having fast internet is still a high privilege. And so making the website really fast for slower speeds is so important for everybody to get access to the data, get access to the information. And so I think, yeah, it's hugely important. I'm a really big fan that the performance of the websites gets a bigger signal for search results. Because in the end, I think everybody of us knows, if you just look like, at which time does my train leave? Or what does eggs cost today? Or which gas station price is how much? And like all these things, just shortly I need the information. If I can get that in a couple of seconds, that's so great. And today sometimes it's really frustrating because it takes you minutes to just get one tiny bit of information. So I think that's super cool. And I think, yeah, it's going to be a topic for the next years. It's not going to go away. And I think we all have to really focus on it and learn more about it. All right.
Yeah, it's a big plus one to all of that.
By the people, the sites are going to be online the whole day. So the test sites. So if you want to give it some more tests, I think yeah, they're around. If you have more questions, amazeeio has a booth, so you can go there and ask questions. You can find Andre and myself on Twitter, and I think we also posted our email addresses in the slides. Maybe do you want to show our contact slide again?
Yes, if I can find it, give me a second. Should be able to.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No. It should be. Oh God, where is it now? Christ. Close that tab now. Well, while I go looking for that tab, what was it called? DrupalCon. There's two things I want to share with you as well while I have the chance.
Go ahead.
Now, first of all, this actually, Michael, we haven't had a chance to discuss this because we're so busy getting ready for this after getting introduced. But Google has spun up an open source CMS fund, specifically with the purpose of supporting open source CMSs. And for now, at least up until now, we've been heavily focused on financing performance-related initiatives. So you'll see here, there's a link in the chat, that there's a bunch of stuff that's been accepted, some stuff has been rejected. We haven't done a great job yet. We'll make it better to improve the documentation on the website itself, but I'm telling you directly, so you hear it from the horse's mouth. For now, what we're really 120% focused on is projects that aim to improve performance at a core level. So I know that open source, you can't just commit to the core willy-nilly, but ideas that are likely to improve performance for the entire platform and have a chance of being accepted by the community. So not so outlandish that they would be rejected out of hand. We're really keen to see more come in. So anybody here right now watching us live or even the recording who's interested in this, the link is in the chat. It's not going to be, you're not going to be able to see it in the recording. So what I'm going to do, well, just search for Google Open Source CMS Fund. It's easy to find. And if you have ideas like this, please come in and submit, and we'll take a look. There's no horribly complicated review process, but I emphasize that for now, it has to be an open. Well, I mean, we're talking to Drupal here, so Drupal qualifies by definition for sure, but then it has to be performance related, and it has to have a chance to be adopted at the core level. So if it's just maybe I say just an extension. Extensions are also hard to build, but if you think it's going to be an extension used by a few hundred developers here and there, that might be not the kind of thing that we want to prioritize first. But if you think it's something that can at first be produced as an extension and then adopted into the core after review, at least has a chance of that, I'd love to take a look at that. That's number one. And then the other thing is a bit more of a plug, but it's free, so this hope that's all right. The Chrome Dev Summit is coming up. So those of you not familiar with this is our annual seminal, like tentpole event for all of Chrome, where all new things. What made me think of it is that we were talking about Webp Vitals and how we learned about them and how they were a good thing, according to Michael and me. It's fully online this year, as most things. So, no costs involved. Just make sure, and you don't need to register to watch it, but still probably makes sense to request an invite so you get all the links sent to you in a timely manner. And there's a bunch of workshops and even office hours, including dedicated to Webp Vitals, but not only. Those definitely require you to sign up for in advance because they have limited capacity. What I would also say, as a quick preview to those here, watch that space carefully. You'll hear lots of interesting things about performance at the CDS as well, right? Lots of interesting new things that we haven't talked about before. And while all of that is happening, I'm still trying to find our slides and with our contacts, so we can leave folks with it. While I'm looking for that, maybe folks have stuff to share about the experience of using Michael's advice to boost the performance of the test website. Any comments on that? Any difficulties? Any successes? Silence in the chat. Will everybody wake up? Well, at the very least, I found this hugely insightful. I'm by far, I must admit this straight away, I'm not a Drupal specialist, right? So I've never built a Drupal website in my life. So it's been hugely insightful to me as well, Mike. So thanks for that. That opened my eyes to a couple of things. And then the interface as well, I feel a little less intimidated by it now. I think I'm sharing am I sharing? Are you sharing?
No, I found it. I found it. While you were talking.
Yeah, you beat me to it. Awesome. Yeah, this is us.
Yeah, I think, thanks everybody for joining. Like I said, play with the sites more around. If you have questions, reach out to us. The email addresses and Twitter handles are here. I might be a bit busy this week with all the balloon stuff, but next week is much better. And yeah, go and make websites faster for all of us, let's say.
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks a lot to everybody who joined us today. Thank you, Michael. And we'll see each other on the internet somewhere.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.